Well, I'm Arran Stibbe from the University of Gloucestershire, and I think it's very difficult for us to think about the end of the human because it's such a huge scale. And so if we're going to be thinking about this, it might help to look at people who are facing the end on an individual, personal level first and see what we can learn from them. So some research that I did was about cancer patients, and just looking at when they found out that they had cancer and that it was likely to be a very serious illness, what reaction was it? How did they react to that? What did they do? And there were two real stages for this. So at first they felt this is absolutely awful, it's unimaginable, and they felt they had to fight to stay alive. So there's this fighting stage, fighting and battling the cancer. And this can be good because sometimes they can get over it. But then there came another stage where the doctor performed a piece of social magic and said that your disease is now terminal. And then from that point, all of that fighting suddenly became useless. All of the fighting and battling, even if it was just on a slight off chance that they might survive, all of that didn't prepare them for that moment. And so from the moment when their disease was declared terminal to the moment that they died, they were very depressed and they didn't know what to do because they hadn't prepared for that. But on the other hand, there are also people who were prepared to imagine that perhaps at some point in the future their disease is going to become terminal. And those people were fighting, they were trying to survive, but at the same time they were preparing for this possibility that perhaps they weren't going to make it. They were doing things like enjoying being alive, enjoying nature, enjoying being with the people around them. Perhaps they had people that they'd argued with before and they were making it up to them and trying to absolutely get the most out of the last few weeks, perhaps of their life, last few months of their life, perhaps last few days of their life. So perhaps this is something that we need to do on a global scale. Now that climate change looks like there's a strong possibility that it will be irreversible, perhaps we need to do everything we can to save carbon, to reduce the amount of carbon dioxide that we emit. This is the fighting, but perhaps we also need to prepare for what looks increasingly likely, and that is that climate change is going to be irreversible. And preparing for irreversible climate change means adaptation. It means thinking about what kind of societies will survive and thrive even as the climate becomes more unstable. And you can actually link adaptation and mitigation together so that you can start doing things which reduce the amount of carbon dioxide, but at the same time help prepare your society for a future of instability in the climate. So for example, planting lots of trees on floodplains, a diversity of trees on floodplains. This is something which could reduce the amount of carbon dioxide. But also, if we get to irreversible climate change, it could provide a more stable ecosystem that will provide food, if you plant fruit trees and nut trees, provide food for a longer period. Not necessarily forever, though. But at least in the initial stages, as the climate becomes more unstable, then we've prepared for that and we can do something active. But then we get to another potential stage where the changes in the climate are just not the kind that you can adapt to. The changes are too big and you grow your forests and all the trees die because the temperature is just changing too quickly. And then you have to think, well, what do we do then? And then we have to think back to the cancer patients about trying to get the most out of what we've got now, trying to appreciate the people around us, trying to appreciate what remains of the natural systems that we have around us. Doing the best that we can to make things as positive as they can possibly be until we face what is really the point of absolute no return when we are facing a collapse. So this is a realistic kind of hope. It's not a vague optimism that everything's going to be all right, because it may very well not be all right. It's about preparing for that eventuality, preparing for a time when it's not all right, and trying to get the most out of life until that point.